What happens when the sanctuary you call home turns into a ticking time bomb? I discovered the invisible threat lurking beneath my feet, and it urged me to fight back for my family's safety. A storm rumbled in the distance, coinciding with the chaos churning inside my mind. The malignant odor of rotten eggs clawed at my throat, turning my stomach into a violent knot. I could hardly remember what it felt like to breathe freely within these walls now. Each inhalation was a toxic gamble, as my thoughts collided in a cacophony of dread. How long had this gas been leaking into my home? Was my family exposed to this invisible killer while I buried my head in the sand, discounting my anxiety as mere paranoia? The revelation hit me with the force of a freight train. Gary Mason, the so-called minor issues specialist, had become an unwilling accomplice in this horror play. He'd sold me a home dangerously close to a landfill, knowing full well the dangers laced into its very foundation. Rage ignited in my chest as I replayed our conversation. His dismissive buyers should be responsible comment haunted me like a shadow. Did he think we were made of stone, immune to the horrors that lurked just beneath our feet? I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and dialed Liam's number, desperate for some clarity amid the hissing dread rising in my throat. His friendly demeanor had always been a balm, yet even he wouldn't be able to console me this time. "Claire," he greeted, clearly caught off guard by my urgency. "Is everything okay?" Without hesitation, I spilled my suspicions like a broken dam, expressing my fears about the gas and how I'd felt like a prisoner in my own sanctuary. There was no patronizing laughter or dismissive tones in his voice, only a palpable seriousness that echoed my own spiraling heart. "I've been warning the neighborhood all year about that landfill. It's dangerous, Claire. Methane isn't just a nuisance, it's lethal." His words came tumbling out, each one igniting new fears while also demanding that I face the inevitable reckoning. Just then, the storm cracked across the sky, and for a moment, it mirrored the tempest raging inside me. "Meet me at my place. Right now," I commanded, words spilling out in a rush. I hung up, adrenaline coursing through me, the need for immediate action overshadowing even my usurped fear. I could visualize the map of my neighborhood, a web of injustices connecting the earlier careless decisions with the present catastrophe unfolding around me. The thought of my children playing in the backyard while suffocating under a silent haze of methane sent me spiraling into a frenzy. I took a deep breath to steady myself, focusing on the sloshing anger bubbling within while pacing the confines of my small living room. This was no longer just about foul smells or migraines. It was a war, my fight against callous ignorance and negligence that had woven itself into the fabric of our community. I felt a threat, a very personal threat, and worse, an obligation to protect my children from the darkness just beyond our threshold. When Liam arrived, his expression was grim but resolute, an easy translation of the turmoil etched in my brow. We wasted no time. I dragged him down to the basement, that murky underbelly of our home that suddenly felt like the site of an impending disaster. "I need you to help me understand this," I pleaded, gesturing toward the walls that felt like they were closing in, closing off the world from the poisoned air lurking behind them. He nodded slowly, surveying the surroundings. "Claire, if the gas is leaking, we need to find out how. This isn't just a household problem, it's a community issue." A lump formed in my throat, choking back the helplessness that threatened to snaffle my resolve. With each word, my determination hardened into something tangible, a shield against fear and doubt. We started working together almost instinctively, gaining momentum like a freight train building speed down a twisted track. As we paced through the house, Liam's easy nature morphed into a fierce determination, his passion for environmental justice shining through like a beacon in the choking darkness. "You need to document everything in case we need to take this further," he instructed, his voice tinged with urgency. I nodded, intent on capturing our reality with fiery conviction. Grabbing my phone, I began recording our findings, the oddly discolored walls, the disconcerting volume of dust motes in the stale air, and the hollow sounds that echoed ominously through the pipes. Each moment I spent gathering evidence felt exhilarating, like harnessing energy from the storm outside. Slowly, the revelation crystallized within me. This would be my moment, My time to fight back against the injustices that had allowed my home, my sanctuary, to become a battleground. Would I allow a careless homeowner and an indifferent bureaucratic machine to take everything from me? No. That night, as we sat under the dim light of the kitchen, poring over maps and old residents' reports, an unwavering resolve settled within me. The echoes of Gary's dismissive laughter and the waves of methane curling around our lives built a raging fire in my heart. I clung to my mission, the urgency of exposing this environmental crime, and felt myself transforming from a fearful homeowner into a warrior for justice. Tomorrow, we start making calls. We're not staying silent any longer. I resolved, determination seeped into each word. The path ahead may be perilous, but for the sake of my family and our community, I would use every ounce of my fury to hold accountable those who thought they could play with our lives so carelessly. Would I rise up against this overwhelming injustice and claim the air I was being denied? Yes, and I would drag every bit of truth to the surface. As the sun began to rise, casting shadows that danced on the wall of what used to feel like my safe haven, I understood that mere frustration would no longer suffice. I was done wallowing in ignorance, and instead, I was armed with raw determination. With my heart racing, I began processing everything Liam had unearthed. The true weight of the situation crashed down around me. Our health was teetering on the edge of crisis, depending on a community that had turned a blind eye to the very dangers that surrounded us. I glanced around my home, surveying the once cheerful corners that now felt tainted and foreign. This wasn't just about gas leaks anymore. It was about everything this community stood for: the sanctity of our homes, the safety of our families, and the right to live without the specter of environmental neglect looming over us. Charting a path through the escalating storm of bureaucratic refusal, I settled at my kitchen table with an arsenal of documents and reports. Flashing lights from my laptop illuminated the mounting evidence of negligence from the local government and the landfill itself. Each click of the keyboard reverberated like war drums to my ever-growing rage. I was unwilling to settle for the placated responses from civil servants who seemed more concerned about appearance than the health of their constituents. "These reports are practically love letters to complacency," I muttered under my breath, cursing the indifference that broadcasted from the pages. I could feel my hands trembling, not from fear, but from the surge of a righteous crusade brewing within me. My resolve bubbled with a voltage that felt almost electric, as I meticulously annotated details on how long it had taken the local government to act on multiple complaints regarding gas emissions, accounts of smoke and chemicals leaking into backyards, and they did nothing, I whispered to myself incredulously. Each line read felt like an accusation thrown against those who should have been my allies, those who had betrayed us by allowing such negligence to exist with a knowing shrug. Gazing at the city council emails, I could almost see the disinterest in their automated replies, the robotic nature dressed in impersonal jargon. Rage smoldered beneath my skin, igniting a reminder of why I was thrust into this fight, because I refused to let our home, our air, our safety turn into a backdrop for the indifference that had curdled into a familiar scent. Just then, my phone buzzed through the chaos, a stark reminder of reality pressing in. It was a message from Liam. "We need to talk about organizing a meeting with the neighbors," it read. My fingers danced across the touchscreen, typing furiously, heart racing in agreement. I knew then that I was prepared to transform our pain into purpose, to galvanize our neighbors into a unified voice willing to press back against the infestation of incompetence. "Yes, let's discuss time, place, and what we need to present," I typed, imagining how many homes were filled with the same haunting dread that now coursed through me. The thought of connecting with others, of pooling our findings into a coherent force, surged like a tide washing over me. We wouldn't go quietly. I wouldn't sit idly by as our community's well-being lay in shambles. Days blurred into each other as I began canvassing the neighborhood with pamphlets and fervor. Each door knocked caught unsuspecting faces, shattering their complacency as I conveyed our plight in a frenzy. I could almost taste their disbelief, their questions spilling over into apprehensive awe, but that shock was quickly converted into a rallying cry for action. "You mean we've all been living in this toxic haze?" one woman gasped, clutching her child's hand protectively. Exactly. Anxiety skated across their features like ice on thin ground as they absorbed the brutal truth of our collective fate. It wasn't just me, it was everyone. And as their outrage bubbled to the surface, I became the vessel, leading us into confrontation with the forces that had tied our hands. As the meeting approached, I felt the anticipation fill the room, swirling thickly around us as neighbors gathered, united by a shared sense of dread and outrage. Each face told a story, families huddled together, echoing fears in hushed, worried tones. I marveled at the kaleidoscope of experiences swirling around me, fueled by their anger and sorrow. It was electric. When I stood to speak, the weight of communication rested heavily on my shoulders. Raw emotion poured from my heart and into the air. Words formed a hard, tangible resolve. Vetsant let apathivin. This gas leak is not just about us, but about the generations that will inherit this battle, I declared, my voice reverberating like a war cry, igniting determination within the hearts of those around me. Emboldened by that potent energy, we crafted our plans. Letters, phone calls, and powerful blog posts flooded forth like the unrelenting tide, demanding accountability from the local government. Each correspondence was layered with evidence, each plea laced with a fierce indignation that demanded answers. We would not be ignored. No longer would the cries for help dissipate like mist in the air. The crescendo of our momentum swirled around us, transforming the anxiety I once felt into an unyielding force for change and awareness. Together, we were interwoven voices thrusting against the weight of negligence, prepared to unveil the deceit that had infiltrated our lives. With every step forward, I could feel the weight of the burden lessening. The darkness that had wrapped around my heart now illuminated, a powerful flame of collective justice that coursed through our community. We were more than just individuals fighting for our homes. We were an army. Can you feel the winds of change beginning to howl across our streets? As the days turned into a whirlwind of confrontation, I found myself standing outside the city council building, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. The sight of the looming structure, once an uninspiring edifice, now felt like a fortress holding the very injustices that had assailed us for too long. Rows of residents gathered at my sides, faces alight with righteous anger, their voices merging into a united anthem of dismay and determination. Signs emblazoned with powerful slogans waved overhead like battle flags. Our homes matter, and no more silence. I could feel their energy coursing through me, a powerful current steadily building as we prepared to push back against the bureaucracy that had for too long turned a blind eye to our suffering. Today was going to be different. This time, we were going to make them listen. Inside the council chamber, the atmosphere crackled with tension, the clatter of chairs and murmur of anxious whispers vibrating like a charged wire threatening to snap. I stepped up to the podium, my heart nearly beating out of my chest, but every determined gaze that met mine instilled me with bravery. I could feel Liam's steady presence beside me, a reassuring anchor amidst the storm. As I took a deep breath, the fresh scent of resolve drifted through me, each inhalation igniting my passion further. The room fell quiet, the onlookers turning to listen as I raised my voice, trembling yet fierce. We stand here today not just as neighbors, but as a unified front against a cavalcade of neglect. Our lives have been compromised, and the time for complacency is over. Their fervor erupted, a swell of encouragement rippling through the crowd, electrifying the air around me. Each word I spoke seemed to strike a chord with them, igniting flickers of fury like kindling catching flame. We have gathered testimonies of nausea, headaches, and fatigue that have haunted our children, our friends, and our families, just a stone's throw from this very building. How can you, the stewards of our community, continue to fail us? We've given you our voices, and we demand you stand in solidarity with us, not only for our safety today, but for generations to come. Murmurs of agreement punctuated my speech, underlining the raw power of our collective outrage. I could see some council members shifting uncomfortably, a flicker of doubt crossing their stoic exteriors, a crack in their rigid armor. Perhaps they finally grasped the depth of our desperation, the urgency that clawed at my throat like a living thing. I stepped back, heart racing, drenched in adrenaline and anticipation. Then came a chorus of testimonials from neighbors, their trembling words layered with emotion that stirred the depths of our shared plight. Families recounted nights plagued by gas leaks that lured them into a false sense of security, moments when normalcy was shattered by the fear of invisible toxins. The strength of our stories compounded like an avalanche, each narrative collapsing onto the next with dramatic impact. I caught glimpses of council members exchanging glances, the stirrings of consideration finally sinking in. Names and faces of our collective suffering united us, sculpting a formidable wall that demanded acknowledgement. We weren't just voices in the void anymore. We were an undeniable movement, a testament to the strength of community ignited by outrage. As the meeting progressed, I watched the council members grapple with the gravity of our situation. Their dismissals, once casual, began to waver under the intense scrutiny of our presence. When one member finally stood to address us, his voice slightly trembling, my heart raced with a mix of hope and disbelief. "We hear you," he began falteringly, "and we understand your frustrations." The room collectively held its breath. A glimmer of accountability sparked in the air, a tension that was more electrifying than the gas we had spent so long scheming against. I squeezed Liam's arm, the warmth radiating between us a powerful reminder of our unwavering mission. If they were willing to engage, it might just be the crack in the dam that could release the floodgates of necessary changes. The meeting culminated with an agreement to investigate our claims further, a small but mighty victory that felt like a gust of relevant wind propelling our fight forward. As we exited the building, a surge of triumph coursed through us, faces flushed with exhilaration and disbelief. Within moments, phones began buzzing, a cadre of messages riding the wave of our new momentum. "This is just the beginning. We need to keep this alive," a neighbor exclaimed, inspired by the dripping enthusiasm spilling from our small coalition. Plans and ideas began to merge into one grand tapestry of belief. Initiatives to educate others about the unseen threats in our midst. Methods to ensure that our voices rang clear at every subsequent meeting, and discussions on forming a formal action group that would keep the pressure high against the local government's complacency. Walking back home, I felt lighter somehow. The weight of despair I had carried for so long began to lift, replaced by the warmth of communal resolve. My home, previously cloaked in fear, began to shed its darkness. Each step I took toward it felt powerful, not burdened. It was the kind of relief that circulated through our veins, a liberation from the silent grip of years of negligence. Claire Thompson, once just a meticulous planner consumed with anxiety, now stood tall with the fierce heart of a warrior. Empowered not just by my individual fight, but by the electric pulse of collective justice, I gravitated towards a future where safety and wellness thrived, lighting the flames of change with unwavering determination. What would become of us now? The embers of revolution had sparked. Could we truly harness them into a wildfire of transformation? The day after our small triumph at City Hall dawned with an uncharacteristically blue sky, the warmth of sunlight brushing against my skin, almost mocking the whirlwind of emotions churning inside of me. Somehow, in the aftermath of that meeting, the shadows lurking in my home felt less suffocating. The tension that had hung in the air like a smothering fog now began to dissipate, replaced instead by a fragile shimmer of hope. That's when the phone rang, a cold jolt of apprehension slicing through my newly kindled optimism. It was an unknown number, and as I contemplated letting it go to voicemail, the echo of Liam's words about vigilance flashed before my mind. "Stay alert, Claire. We can't afford to be caught off guard." With a breath that felt more like a vow than an exhalation, I answered, the heaviness of expectation draping over me like a shroud. "Claire Thompson?" The voice on the other end bristled with unfamiliar authority, sharp and immediate. "This is Jordan Taggart from the City Council's Environmental Task Force. We need to discuss your concerns regarding the landfill gas leak." My heart dropped, a mix of fear and confusion coursing through my veins. This could be the breakthrough we had been thirsting for, or it could be another bureaucratic trap laced with empty promises. "Can we meet today?" he continued, barely giving me a moment to gather my thoughts. "I assure you, we take your claims seriously, but we need to discuss the scope of the issue." The sound of his voice, although brusque, held a glimmer of urgency that ignited a spark beneath my skin. I agreed in a jittery voice, hardly able to grasp the gravity of what was unfolding. As the clock inched closer to our meeting, doubts rumbled in my mind like an impending storm. I paced my familiar living room, its walls once my sanctuary, now prickling with tension as I replayed every word from the recent council meeting in my mind. It was maddening to consider. Had our voices truly broken through the fortress of indifference? Doubts crept in like shadows, whispering that perhaps I was simply deluding myself with this glimmer of change. It was then that I noticed a familiar face appear at my window. Liam stood there, his enthusiastic grin bursting forth like the sun breaking through storm clouds. He rushed in without waiting for an invitation, his contagious energy infusing the room with purpose. "Did you hear?" he said, breathless and bright-eyed. "I heard from a few neighbors that Taggart wants to discuss potential actions based on our claims. This is it, Claire. We need to prepare." The ensuing hours became a whirlwind of strategizing, laughter, and contagious enthusiasm. As we sprawled across my living room floor with charts, legal documents, and various handwritten notes, I felt the transformation within me deepening. This was no longer about me or my family. This was a collective movement to protect our community's essence against an encroaching threat. We dissected the timeline of events, piecing together testimonies, collating statements that illuminated the devastating impact of the gas leaks. We can't just be demanding safety. We need to articulate the changes we expect from the council, Liam emphasized, an irrefutable fervor lighting his hazel eyes. I could see not just a persistent activist in him, but a friend who understood the depth of my frustrations and fears. Every laugh we shared, every plan we concocted, infused me with an irrepressible energy, transforming my anxiety into fierce determination. As we gathered the final pieces of our presentation, I felt a palpable shift. This was more than just a community meeting. It was our rallying cry against a system that had too long ignored us. "We need to take this seriously. The stakes are life and death," I declared, my voice stronger now, not shaking with uncertainty, but resonating with conviction. The power of our collective experience imbued every syllable with palpable urgency. The sun had set outside by the time we finally composed ourselves, a warm glow emanating from the table where our plans lay scattered. I felt the familiar grip of anxiety release its hold on me. Instead, I clutched a fresh sense of purpose, a reckoning that surged within. Our home should not just be where we nestle into the night, but now a launchpad for change that rippled outwards and demanded reflection from those who governed us. The next day arrived with an air of expectancy, each hour stretching and contracting with moments of anticipation as we awaited our appointment at the city council offices. As we strode towards that formidable building once more, I noticed a connection blooming in the hearts of our fellow neighbors, a burgeoning movement coiling around us, like a tight-knit rope of solidarity. Alongside Liam, I felt a renewed sense of courage capturing my spirit, a flame now incandescent enough to illuminate the darkest corners of our city council's deep-seated complacency. We walked not merely as individuals with grievances, but as a tidal force of change determined to expose the negligence we had suffered for too long. As we stepped into the meeting room, a tense silence enveloped us, tension thick as fog. This was it, the moment we had prepared for, where every hurt, every voice finally had the chance to collide with authority, demanding change. We arrayed ourselves in a line, the council members perched in their chairs, poised to receive us. The meeting began with the usual formality until one council member shot me a glance that hinted of impatience. But this time I was no longer afraid. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, our voices rising in unison, piercing through the distraction with a united front. Action. We demand action. Did this council understand the power of our shared struggle? Or would they crumble like the inadequate promises that filled the cracks in their facade? As I stood there, the weight of every deflected concern and hushed justification hung heavy in the air. The council members, those shadowy arbiters of authority, shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their disdainful gazes reflecting a mix of boredom and condescension. But there was an unexpected shift that coursed through me, a rush of power, red-hot and undeniable. "We are not here to coddle your egos. or indulge your bureaucratic theatrics, I stated, my voice steady but charged, echoing off the austere walls of the assembly hall. We were armed with facts. Our lives had been a ticking clock of despair, and now it was our turn to dictate the rhythm of accountability. I could feel Liam's fierce approval from his stance behind me, the unspoken strength of solidarity swelling in my chest, a unity forged from tragedy, ignited under the burden of shared indignation as the room shifted, absorbing my desperate fervor. Then suddenly, without warning, a voice sliced through the tension like shattered glass, a callous retort from Councilmember Richards, his purple tie stiffening with disdain. "And what do you have to substantiate these baseless claims, Miss Thompson?" he scoffed, his tone dripping with indifference, as though he had plucked the words straight from a scripted dismissal. My pulse quickened, fury pulsating through me like a live wire. Who was he to belittle the scars our community bore? To dismiss our lives and vitality as mere echoes of inconvenience? The audience of neighbors behind me stirred, their collective breath held, waiting for my retort. It was a moment pregnant with potency, as the flicker of their silent support enveloped me. A moment where frustration fanned the flames of my determination. Your indifference has put lives at stake. Our lives. The air we breathe is poisoned by your negligence. You owe us more than a token acknowledgement of our suffering. We deserve action. My voice boomed, fueled by all that had been stripped away from me, and as I concluded, a murmur of encouragement rippled through the crowd like a shocking wave, amplifying the roots of rebellion. Emboldened by my own audacity, I remembered the carefully assembled documents Liam and I had painstakingly crafted over the past few days, each meticulously chronicled testimony detailing the myriad of health issues we had faced, the subtle erosion of our community's spirit. "Allow me to illustrate," I declared, leafing through the papers, my heart racing as I advanced forward. Each page was a testament of the wrath and resilience reflecting a community ensnared in indignity. "This is what we've experienced. Mrs. Harrow from across the street lost her sense of smell. Mr. Wilkes suffered respiratory distress that sent him running to the ER more times than he could count. The gas leaks are no illusion. They are a stark reality that has invaded every facet of our lives." As the documents wove a tapestry of anguish, a profound realness shimmered about us, a palpable aura, echoing the symphony of our collective struggles, driving home the urgency of our need for reckoning. The council members exchanged glances now, furtive looks that danced from concern to disbelief. I seized this moment as the weight of my words sank in, the undeniable truth lashing at them like a relentless tempest. "When did the citizens of this town become collateral damage?" I questioned, leaning closer, my voice a whisper yet laced with fiery passion. "When did our health become inconsequential? Just another statistic in your meticulous spreadsheets." I could see a flicker of conscience fracture through their stoic facades, a dilemma appearing like the cracking surface of an ice sheet a moment before it collapses into water. It was electrifying to observe the cracks of their authority brewing, visible even behind their perfectly staged expressions of indifference. A murmuring crescendo began to swell around us, our neighbors riled up, their voices rising in harmonious insistence. "We will not be silenced," they chanted, the fervor vibrating through every surface in the room. Yet Richards remained unfazed, of course, continuing the charade of dismissiveness, retreating into the bureaucratic haze. "You may have your voices," he announced with a mocking flourish. "But what of your proof?" My wrath threatened to break free as I grasped the urgency pulsing through every vein in my body. I felt Liam's hand resting gently on my shoulder. The quiet support radiated strength like embers igniting a flame. "We brought you more than just words. We brought you life, Council," I cried back, gathering momentum as I slipped the final document from my pile, a public record proving how many warnings the Council had skirted regarding gas emissions and environmental hazards. Here lies the evidence of negligence, of feigned inaction. You cannot hide behind facades anymore. Your time of avoidance is over. I thrust the paper forward, determination coursing within me, a tempest battling against their apathy. A ripple of energy surged through the room as other council members began stirring, some whispering inaudibly, their previous convictions faltering under the weight of undeniable proof. I could sense the balance shifting, a hesitant acknowledgement teetering upon their troubled brows. Suddenly, an adjacent voice flicked to life. It was a young council member, perhaps new to this labyrinth of indecipherable politics. "What can we do?" she asked, eyes wide with vulnerability. The flicker of hope ignited in me as I met her gaze. "You can choose to change. You can choose to act and protect us, not just from the gas, but from your own negligence. We can mobilize. We need your leadership, your initiative. Join us." The room crackled, the stirrings of realization intertwining with the fervor of demand rippling through the ranks of concerned citizens behind me. As the words escaped my lips, I knew this was it, the trembling culmination of righteous anger and pure tenacity. The council was no longer an entity looming like a dark cloud over our lives. We had transformed them into a reflection of our mutual aspirations, our shared humanity lamenting for recognition. Gone were the feelings of simple helplessness, replaced with a rising tide of advocacy bound to change the narrative unfolding before us. The ghosts of frustration and despair were no longer mere shadows, but momentum propelling each body in that room. The council would have to reckon with the collective roar of an awakened community. Would they rise to the occasion, or would we bring down the walls built on years of disregard and neglect? The moment hung in the air, heavy with anticipation, a reckoning poised to change everything. As the murmurs of uncertainty cascaded through the audience, I felt a rush of adrenaline catapulting me forward, shattering the chains of indecision once and for all. The council room, which earlier felt like an impenetrable fortress of bureaucracy, was now a battleground etched in defiance and desperation. The weight of dozens of voices surged behind me, each word whispered from the collective, drowning in fear, anger, and unspeakable loss. This was no longer merely about the gas seeping into our homes. This was about our dignity, our health, and the very fabric of our community. "You have the power to stand with us, or let us fall into the shadows of your negligence," I declared, my heart pounding in my chest like thunder, commanding the attention of those seated with their polished facades. The young council member's hesitant inquiry reverberated with an unexpected resonance, amplifying the hope flickering like a candle against the darkness of neglect. "What can we do?" It was a question laden with possibility, an opening I could not waste. It felt like the first crack in a dam that had held back the torrent of community outrage for far too long. The energy in the room shifted palpably. The atmosphere thickened with urgency, stirring an avalanche of inspiration in those gathered beside me. "You can listen," I urged, turning my gaze to encompass those men and women sitting shielded by authority. "You can summon the courage to admit your failure and take action. Bring transparency to your meetings. Create real channels for us to voice our concerns." The growing resolve was not just mine anymore, but the fierce determination of a town awakened from a long slumber of complacency. As I spoke, I glimpsed Liam's face directly behind me, his excited nod electrifying the air around us. This was not just the work of one person, but a collective uprising charged with fervent intentions. The grim reality of the gas leaks now served as a rallying cry, an emblem of our plight rooting us deeper into the shared experience of injustice. The citizens, ignited by shared hopes, began rallying their voices, punctuating my words with fervent calls for involvement and improvement. "We want clean air. We demand accountability. You owe us." The rhythm of our synchrony stung like a sharp wind, cutting through the walls of ignorance, filling the room with an undeniable energy pushing up against the apathy of our elected officials. Suddenly, the tall figure of Council Member Richards, with his haughty demeanor, stood, his brows knitting tightly as if somehow unaware of the ground swelling beneath him. "You must understand," he started, his tone laced with condescension but now tinged with unease. "The city has many pressing issues, and your situation—" I felt a flash of heat, like a fire igniting the air around me, and I stepped closer, unwilling to let him slip back into trivialization. "You mean our lives, our health, our homes, are just another item on your agenda?" I shot back, each word an arrow piercing the facade of indifference. "Your systems are designed to protect your legacy, not to shield us from danger. We demand priority and urgency. At that moment, I could feel the entire room leaning in, not just in anticipation, but in a throaty swell of solidarity that lit each face with newfound determination. This wasn't merely a confrontation. It transformed into a narrative that held the weight of our stories, our fears etched into the air we breathed. I glanced around. Mothers held their children tighter. The elderly white-knuckled their canes, and even the more skeptical townsfolk were leaning forward, drawn into this brewing storm. I could sense the shift, the gravity of purpose eclipsing the dull monotony of old politics, and it spurred me on. Join us, instead of shielding yourselves behind your desks. All we are asking for is to breathe freely, live safely, and hold you accountable for the purview of our lives. And then, like a flame brushed by wind, the breakthrough came when one of the stalwart members in the back, a woman I knew fought for rather than against, stood up, her eyes shimmering with fierce resolve. "What can we do?" she repeated, but this time her tone felt laced with conviction, not uncertainty. In that moment, the atmosphere crackled with opportunity, the audience hanging on to that question as if it was a lifesaver, thrown in the stormy sea of despair. First, we need a coalition, a united front of citizens and council members. We need the creation of a task force dedicated to this issue, with our voices heard, prioritized, and celebrated. Each word felt liberating, the momentum steadily tugging at us all towards sanctity and community. The council members shuffled again, some exchanging furtive whispers, but for the first time I saw them collectively on the edge of something, an acknowledgement of responsibility brewing like the winds of an impending storm. My voice turned raw, dripping with passion. You now understand. Our lives are more than mere figures on a pie chart. Let us come together, bridge these gaps. We can facilitate community education on health risks, conduct baseline tests, and create transparent channels for all concerned citizens. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause, a wave of resonance that pulsated through me and tore through the stale ambiance of bureaucratic dismissal. An unbelievable moment hung between anger and anticipation, the faces before me reflecting a newfound purpose, an unyielding desire for change that glimmered as a shared truth amidst the warring feelings of grief and hope. "So will you stand with us?" I called, my heart hammering with urgency, my soul crying for justice. Will you grow beyond the rigid confines of old systems and commit to hold our lives in higher esteem? Will you finally take tangible steps to ensure our voices echo and our concerns are heeded? A murmur surged behind me, reverberate like a battle cry, eager to take ownership of this fight together. At that moment, what began as a mere valley of despair threatened to burst forth into a mountain of resolve. I stood firmly, breathing the air that hinted at a new beginning, poised for whatever the future dared to unveil. Would they finally take heed to our plight and fight alongside us? The air inside the council chamber buzzed with an electric mix of hope and agitation, as though every pair of eyes there had collectively drawn a deep breath, ready to unleash something monumental. "Will you stand with us?" I had asked again, each syllable rolling off my tongue with relentless insistence. The council members shifted uneasily, their polished facades cracking beneath the weight of our scrutiny. My heartbeat thrummed in sync with the collective pulse of the crowd, a living organism straining against the artificial barriers of bureaucracy. I could sense the tide turning, feel the unsteady footing of indifference beneath those who had too long buried their heads in the sand, and it invigorated my resolve. A voice from the back, Liam, my steadfast neighbor, shouted, "We'll build that coalition. We've got the people to rally behind us." His words sparked a chain reaction, igniting cheers that erupted like a phoenix rising from the ashes of complacency. A wave of enthusiasm washed over me. This is what we needed. I turned back toward the council, my heart swelling with the realization that maybe, just maybe, we were on the precipice of true change. We can organize community, clean up events, health screenings, and outreach programs to involve everyone affected, I continued, my voice a clarion call of determination. Together we can create the change that has been so long overdue. Councilmember Richards couldn't hide his apprehension any longer. With his beady eyes darting back and forth, It became clear that our fervor had pierced the carefully constructed wall of apathy he had erected around himself. "While I appreciate your enthusiasm, the logistics," he began, but I stepped forward, cutting him off. "Logistics? You mean the same outdated, dispassionate systems that have ignored our cries for years? This time, you don't get to choose ease over duty. Our homes, our health, they are not bargaining chips in your game of city politics." The words came pouring out, each dripping with the sentiment that had swallowed my sanity for too long. I turned to the crowd, desperate for their eyes to convey a burning understanding of what was at stake. Every one of us had faced the dread that came with the realization. We were inhaling poison disguised as comfort. "We've had too many empty promises," I cried out, glancing at the faces, searching for affirmation. From young mothers cradling their babies to elderly citizens wielding canes, my plea transcended personal grievances. What we need is commitment, a tangible pledge. The roiling sea of support behind me surged forward, echoing my fervor as communal cries filled the air. No more empty words, no more broken promises. We deserve better. In stark contrast to the vibrant atmosphere surrounding me, I caught sight of Gary Mason, the previous owner of my home. His scowl seemed almost chiseled into his worn face, disdain bubbling just beneath the surface. I could see satisfaction flickering in his eyes as though a part of him relished the chaos he had spawned. The unholy legacy of negligence, now a living nightmare within the community he had abandoned. As if sensing my gaze, he turned away, slouching in his chair, refusing to engage with the energy that buzzed around us. "You can scoff all you want, Gary, but this fight belongs to us now, and we will rise above the ashes of your neglect." My voice rang out, cutting through the tension and brushing aside his ghostly influence. Finally, the mayor, a woman known not for her bravery but for her calculated words, stirred her seat. Her face was an inscrutable mosaic of fear and realization. Perhaps for the first time, she understood that disengagement had robbed her of authority. "I will call for an emergency meeting," she declared, a hint of anger threatening to seep into her usually measured tone. "But make no mistake, we need cooperative efforts forward. If we are to act, it cannot be driven solely by emotion." A rush of disdain for that phrase pushed through me, yet it fueled my backbone. "We don't need your approval to feel. We need action, today," I thundered back, my heart racing at the daring of such a bold proclamation. The air crystallized around us, thick with anticipation, as the reality of our conversation hit hard. What began as mere whispers of change flickered under the council's gaze now roared like wildfire. Each word and act pushed harder against the oppressive weight of inaction. The tension simmered, palpable and relentless, as the clock on the wall ticked steadily towards our fate. I stood at the epicenter of inevitability, a slingshot ready to unleash our fury not just for vindication, but for the lives we cherished, for those yet to find shelter from their own nightmares. "Who's with me?" I yelled, my heart aflame with the ferocity of my words, knowing that the battle was only beginning. This time, we wouldn't be unheard. This time, our voice would carry like thunder across the very foundations of this town. Would we forge a future where our community not only survived, but thrived?